Hey, hello, I'm Benita from the Anxiety Recovery School and from Future-edgetherapy. That is my one-to-one business, and today I'm here to speak to you about neuroplasticity. And I'm really pleased to be able to launch my Therapist in a Pocket series. And I'm bringing you this today in a video format so that you can replay it and really get to understand what the concept of neuroplasticity means. So actually, what is neuroplasticity? It's got to do with our brains. And I've brought my little trusty little brain here. This is sort of what the size of a brain looks like. It only weighs about 1.4 kilograms. And actually, there's no difference in some people think if they've got a bigger brain, would they be more intelligent? Well, actually, the answer is no. I think Einstein was known to have a much smaller brain than anybody else, but yet he was a genius. So actually, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change its structure and its function through targeted mental experiences. So our brain is pliable and it does change. Our brain is pliable and it does change. And I wanted to let you know that today. So what is neuroplasticity? It is how our brains rewire. How does our brain rewire? And also, the brain is made to rewire itself. It's been designed to rewire itself. And we know that the brain changes itself. And we see this through imagery. We see this through using MRI scanners. It's actually really interesting now because before, scientists thought that after we were born, our brain did not change. But we know now through research and a very good scientific research that your brain changes and that you are able to change during your lifetime. It's not static like we thought it was before. Now, I wanted to give you an example of London taxi drivers. Now, when you become a taxi driver in London, you have to undergo a really rigorous test. You actually have to learn all of the streets, all of the venues, all of the big stuff in London. And it takes about 6 months for them to learn that. And then they have to take a very big exam. There's been a really good study shown how images were taken of taxi drivers before they did the exam of their brain and of the taxi driver's brain after the exam and when they've been successful. And there have been really big changes in the anterior and posterior hippocampus. Now, the hippocampus is at the back of the brain here. It's sort of situated, if you feel the curve in the brain. And what that does is it is our long and short term storage unit. So when we learn new things, it is stored in our hippocampus. Happy memories, sad memories, things that we've seen and experienced is all stored in our hippocampus. And what it does is it date stamps stuff. So in the past, something's come up, we've relived it, the hippocampus goes, thank you very much, I understand what that means, how it feels, and then it's given a file and a folder. So our hippocampus is like a big storage unit. Okay, so changing how we think makes physical changes in the brain happen. So that's why this week in the Anxiety Recovery School, we've been doing our positive affirmations because we're trying to build up new positive neural pathways to the brain. And we can do that by doing an activity for 21 days, like reducing sugar. It's impossible to do it all at once because we'll have cravings, feel awful. But if you gradually take it out of your diet, it becomes much easier. That is neuroplasticity. It is your brain actually making those changes, but it's not something we always think about. Now, how do we make changes to the brain? And that is the million-dollar question. And I think that's what everybody wants to know. Now, if you want to change, you need to know how you as an individual, how do you process your anxiety? What does it mean to you? And there are a few things I want you to know from today's video. Number one, what is anxiety? But more in particular, what is the perspective? What is your perspective on it? What do you think your anxiety is all about? Do you think it's bad? Most people think anxiety is a bad thing, but actually it's what keeps us alive. We've got to have a certain amount of anxiety in our body. For example, it motivates us to keep ourselves safe. If we walk towards a cliff edge, immediately your anxiety will go, no, you need to back off. Some people don't have that. They are more adrenaline driven. I think I'm like that. I used to do lots of mountain biking. I love skiing. I'm quite a physical person. So for me, my anxiety isn't that risk averse. I'd always go and maybe push it, but we're not all like that. Interestingly though, and you may not have know this, that anxiety and excitement has the same chemical reaction in the body as adrenaline, and it triggers your parasympathetic activation levels. So actually there's a very thin line between excitement and anxiety, and sometimes those two can become quite confused for us as humans and individuals. Now, second of all, to try and help you change how you see and perceive anxiety is we need to look at whether or not we've got disordered anxiety, and that's a term I'd like you to become familiar with. Is your anxiety disordered? What does this mean? For example, you might get social anxiety, or you might feel that you have anxiety towards work and it starts to build up for you. You start to avoid things. And of course, we know the more we avoid stuff, the more difficult it gets to go back and do it. So the more you try to make it go away, this anxiety, the worse it gets for you. So you may feel danger, but actually you are safe. And a really good example is meeting a dog. For some people like myself, I'd be like, dog, puppy. I love animals. I love dogs. For me, I don't have that fear response. But for some other people, it might be a very frightening experience. And you go, whoa, danger, danger, danger. I don't like that experience. You've had an experience before. But what actually happens is that if you do perceive seeing that dog as danger, your brain thinks, oh my gosh, it could have bitten me. I could have died. Oh my gosh, what else could have happened? It could have bitten my child. So what actually happens is your brain starts to think, it starts to protect you, but what it does is avoid. And what it does is it takes it up a notch. And what inevitably happens is you then start to replicate that behavior. So the next time you see a dog or you meet a dog, you think, oh my gosh, I need to avoid that. What can happen? And your anxiety builds and builds and builds. Actually, this is how your anxiety starts to take over. It may have started with something very small, like perhaps when you were little. We also know that anxiety is a learned behavior. We learn to become anxious. We're not born anxious. We were never intended to be anxious people, but we can actually learn how to be anxious. So how do we move past anxiety? How do we try to live a life without anxiety? Well, it's quite simple. In my next video, which I'm going to post next week, so I'm going to try and do one video for you each week where you're going to learn something really tangible about your anxiety, because inevitably I want you to understand where it's coming from. We are going to learn one simple thing to control it and 3 steps for you to help you create new positive neural pathways to your brain. Now, if you haven't yet taken up the affirmation challenge, absolutely fine. Start posting your affirmations. You may be doing it at home. Thank you so much for everybody that's been posting in the group and writing them down. I hope you started to feel those changes. But one thing I want you to take away today is that your brain can change. It is pliable. It is been proven to change. And with a small steps approach, we can help you break that anxious cycle. Now, I've created the integrated trauma system. It is a system used to deal with trauma, anxiety, and stress. And it is a very, very stepped process. And I hope to share some of that with you. So hopefully you've learnt a lot today. If there are any questions, then please post in the group or message me privately. Have a smashing week, everybody. Bye.